What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to Build It with Tim, where I take your suggestions to build cool stuff in Tadabase, and I'm going to try to build it live and on the fly just for you. Okay, this week we are talking about building a pretty complex user creation workflow. Okay, so what I mean by this, and I realize that I'm oversimplifying it quite a bit here, but we are going to use pipes, email notifications, redirects, rules. We're going to use a ton of different things, including like user roles. There's more to this than what I have listed on the screen here now. But the idea here is that we are going to be building this workflow from the perspective of an administrator of the live application. Okay, so somebody within your organization who has some sort of administration type role, they're going to be creating users for your application. When creating those users, it's going to auto-generate a password. It's going to email that new user their login credentials. Upon logging in, that user is going to be redirected to their profile page, forced to reset their password, and then they can continue on using the application after that is done. Okay, so I'm going to show you this. As usual, I'm going to show you the working application first, and then we'll get to building it. All right, I'll see you in the builder. All right, for our finished application here, or our finished workflow, I should say, because this is going to be a piece of a larger application that you might be building. But here we have a table and a form where I can add a new user. So I'll just add myself for demonstration purposes, Tadabase.io, and we're going to select a user role that I intend for this person to have. I'm going to save this record. You can see it actually changes their role to something different and actually generates a temporary password. And it's going to send me an email, and I'll go ahead and pull that up now so I can show you that. Okay, here is the email that I received with my temporary password. So I'll copy that and a link to log in. So I'm going to click that link to log in. It's going to take me to the login page. I can log in using that temporary password. It's going to redirect me to my profile and tell me to change my password. And once I do that, it will then redirect me back into another page to continue using that app as the user that I was created. Okay, or as the user record that was created for me. All right, so that's the finished workflow. It looks kind of simple on the front end, but trust me, there's going to be a lot to do. So let's jump over to the builder and start. Okay, so I'm ready to get started here. I have built something like this before, but it's been a while. So I'm going to try to pull some of this from memory. And we'll hope for the best here. So the basic workflow here is that we have the users table, right? This is default for every single application. This contains all the necessary information for a user to log in to the front end of your live application. All right, so name, email. All right, the password field is hidden here, but the password field is something that we're going to be concerned with. Profile picture, that's fine. Status, role. We're going to be experimenting with roles a little bit here. I know right now that I need to add another field to hold password. And I'm going to call this temporary password. Okay, and I'll talk about this in, how about right now? We'll talk about it right now. Okay, so here's the deal with passwords. So part of this workflow is that we are going to email the user their password. But for security reasons, Tadabase does not allow for directly emailing a password field, okay, or the value from a password field. So what we're going to do is when we generate this temporary password, this one-time password, when we generate that, we're going to save it to the actual real password field so that the user can actually log in with that password. But we're also going to save it to this text field so that we can email that password out, okay? And in order to generate that password, we're going to install a pipe, okay? And in this case, we're going to do the Tadabase text utilities. You can see one of the methods here is passphrase generator. So let's install that, and I'll show you how this works now. There is no configuration needed for this. All we can do is just go in and test it and play around with some of the values. So here we have default value set, but it's okay. And here we have some help text saying total bits between 26 and 120. So this determines the length of the temporary password, and then whether or not we want a separator. So if we did something like 50, you can see it just creates a random password. Okay, I could probably do something a little bit smaller. Sure, and if we disable, let's see what this does. This takes out that asterisk, and we'll just create this. So we'll run with these parameters when we actually use this live, but this is what's going to happen. All right, we are going to trigger this pipe. It's going to generate the password. It's going to give us a result. We're going to save the result to the real password field and the temporary password field. So let's do that now. Okay, so let's pretend, well, let's say organization users. Okay, so this is going to be for some sort of administrator. And I'm not going to go into depth about like building out layouts to, for this administrator to actually go in and manage this. This is just more about the actual workflow itself and how to do this. All right, so we're going to create a table component on a page. Page is called organization users, and we're going to select the users data table. And here we can do add a form, yes, and we'll toggle on a details page just in case we need it later. Okay, so the add users form, this is going to be for this administrator, this person, to go in and create a new user. So let's just delete everything and we'll start building this form from scratch. Okay, so we're going to have them give the user a name, an email. We can skip the profile picture. That's something that somebody could do once they log in. Status, we may use this status field, so I'm not going to set this right now. Role we can do. Okay, let's just get this up and running. So in the rules here of this form, when we press submit, we are going to update the record that we are creating, and we're going to trigger a pipe. It's going to be the text utilities passphrase generator. Then we're going to set our two parameters, the length. In this case, we'll just keep it short. We'll do 26. And for disable separator, we'll say true. Now, the record values that we're going to set here are going to be the password. So this is the real password field to the pipe value of the result. And we're also going to set the temporary password field to the pipe value of the result. All right, so this is going to save the result into two different fields. One we can email, one we cannot. Okay, and then while we're here, I suppose let's do this. Let's set up an email, and we will do a custom email, and we're going to send it to a field value of email, because that's our email field. And you can fill this out to however you need it, the from name and the from email. A user account has been created for you. Okay, now here we can insert record values if we need to. So we'll say hi to the person that we just created a user account for. A user account has been created for your organization's application, whatever this needs to be, but please log in with the following, let's get this out of the way, credentials and change your password when instructed. How about that? Okay, so here we can say username, and this is going to be their email. Okay, and temporary password is going to be the temporary password field. Okay, and then we'll make this bold. Why not? All right, so I'm going to test this now, and I'll come back and I'll show you the email that we received and what it looks like in the actual record that we created. Okay, so we're going to go to the preview page, get ourselves here. I'm going to add a new user, and then I'll show you that email. Okay. Okay, so I clicked the add new button to add a new user. Here's the email that I did. Sent it pretty much just to myself. And you can see here it created a temporary password, it included it in the email, and it sent it to me. Okay, so we're going to go back to the builder and just take a look at that. So here's the user record that was created. Okay, and even though, like I said, we saved this to two different fields. We saved this to the real password field, we saved it to the temporary password field. Okay, and if I were to go into the login page for this app and I log in with that account, with that temporary password, oops, I didn't set a status. Okay, that's fine. Right, didn't set a status, so we need to fix that. Okay, and let's okay, I remember there's a couple things. They're all coming back to me now about building this. And we need to set some more values. So right now, if this user tries to log in, okay, there is no status set. Our options right now are active, inactive, and not verified. We could probably use a rule to set it to not verified, but right now the login page is restricting any user. It's only going to allow users who have a status of active to log in. So we could change that on the login side, or we could just play with the status field. I'm not going to change it on the login component. I think that's good to keep it there. Right now, we need to deal with roles in the actual status here. Okay, so I know we're going to need another pipe. We're going to need another pipe to look up some information, and we're going to use the Tadabase REST API. So I'm going to explain this as I go. This is all kind of coming back to me in little memories here, one at a time. Here's the general idea. Okay, so we can create a new role, and we'll call this needs password reset. All right, so when a new user is created, we are going to give them the role of needs password reset. And then we are going to later on give them their original role back. And I realize that might not make a whole lot of sense. Let me explain in a moment. All right, so we need to let me make this clear. So we're going to add our user here, and we're going to give them a role, right? Because we want to assign them to a role that they should have within our application. But then we are going to switch their role, and we're going to switch their role to that needs password reset role we just created, so that when they log in, we can redirect them directly to their profile to change it. Okay, but the goal here is that we want to hide as much as this workflow from the user as possible. So we're going to actually, when they update their password, we're going to reset their role to the original role that the administrator gave them. Okay, so let's see what we need to do next. Hang on a second, I got to think about this. So we're going to give them that role. Then we need to save the ID of that role. So if you watch the previous last week's episode of Build It with Tim, we talked a little bit about record IDs. Every record that's within your application has its own unique ID, and that's also true for roles. So we installed the Tadabase REST API pipe. We're going to use that to get information on our user roles. So for right now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set up that pipe with my API credentials, and then I'll show you how we can get some information on those roles. All right, so I've copied all my API information here to a notepad, and I'm just going to now add it to the global parameters of this pipe. Hang on, I lost my notepad. Let me get that back. Okay, so we're going to need that app ID, our app key, and our app secret. And we'll save that. So now that we have our global parameters configured, we are going to be using a couple different calls here, I think. The goal is that when the administrator sets a user role, we want to send an API request to our application to the roles table, and we want to filter where we want to find the ID of that role that was set. Okay. So then after that, we're going to have that ID saved so that we can use it later. Let's just try this first. Okay, so we're going to filter by a single field, I think. In our developer documentation, you're going to see here's the information on getting user roles. We can send a request just to our API, the endpoint of roles, but we can also do it by data table, and this is the ID for the user roles table. So I'm going to copy that for now. And I'm going to go back to filter by a single field. And sorry, I'm going to paste what I just copied into a notepad so I have it. Field ID. Okay, so let's go look at get user roles. So I've already tested this once, just off screen for a moment, but if you go to the get user roles call, we don't have to configure anything or no parameters or anything. We could just test it. And here you're going to see we are showing the 2 user roles that we have. I'm also going to copy this information and paste it into a notepad for future reference. But it looks like rather than field ID or something, we can just do, I think we can just do name. I think that's what we can filter by. So if I, I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but this video is really getting in the weeds of Tadabase here. So this is, we're pushing the limits on this one, but let's continue on. Okay, so we have parameters where the table ID, the field ID, operator. Okay, so let's try this. Okay, I'm gonna get that table ID from, whoops. Let's get the table ID from that user roles table from developer.tadabase.io. Now the field ID, I think we can just say name. We're gonna try this, and we can try to search for default role and see if we get anything. And we did. Okay, awesome. All right, so this is what we're gonna use. We're gonna attach this to our form to add new users. Okay, because then we're gonna filter for the role that we selected, and we're going to save the ID. So in order to save the ID, we need to map the response. All right, so I may have covered this previously, but I'll go over it again. In the response here, we have a JSON structure. Okay, inside of this JSON response, we have an array. This array is indicated, the array key is items, and then we know that it's an array because it has the square brackets here. And inside the array, we have one object indicated by the curly brackets. Okay, so we need to map this out, and in order to do so, we are going to start with, here, I'll show you my notepad with all my copied information here. We're going to start with the first key that we see, which is items. Okay, now because it's an array, we need to specify the index of the array, and array indexes always start at 0. So the first item in the array is actually going to be 0. So by doing items.0, we are telling this response to start here, then go to the first item, and now we need to specify the next key we want the value for. So in this case, we're going to do ID, and that will give us items.0, so first item, and then ID will return this. Okay, so I'm going to go into the response tab here, and I'm going to do just that, items.0.id, and we'll call this role ID. Save it. All right, let's go test that now. To test this, what we're going to do is add another text field, and we're going to call this role ID. Okay, and we'll do the same. We'll do this in the form again. We won't use table rules this time. We'll do it in the form. So rules, record rules. So we're going to add another record rule, and we're going to Let's do the same thing. Update this record, trigger a pipe, Tadabase REST API, filter by a single field. And here we need the table ID, field operator, field value. Okay, table ID is going to come from the developer.tadabase.io where we are listing the table ID for the user roles. That's going to be that. The field ID we figured out can just be name. Operator is, and the filter value is going to be the role. Wait a second. Okay, so this, I think I did this backwards. I think this is not going to work, but let's just press on for a moment. Pipe value of role ID. Yeah, I don't think this is going to work, and I'll show you why in a second. So let's add another user here. Okay, I don't actually care about receiving the email right now, so we'll just do this. And let's save that and then go back to, yeah, all right, so it's not working. Okay, so the role is actually is a connection field. So we actually can't search by the name. We have to get the record by ID. So sorry about that. We'll go and reconfigure that here now. Okay, so we actually need to go back to pipes, API calls. This is going to be get a single record. So rather than filtering by the name, what we're going to do is we're actually going to we need to get a role by a specific ID because connection fields are set with an ID. So I'm glad I saved this information before, the ID of default role, to test this. It just so happens that it is the same as the table ID that we need. All right, so I'm going to copy that too, even though they're the same. All right, so table ID for user roles, record ID for that specific user role within the table. Okay, and here we go. We have this response now. So now we are just singling out a specific record. We're saying get this record by its ID, and then we're going to save that ID. So we need to map this kind of the same way we did before, even though that ended up being incorrect. But this time this is not an array, so we don't have to do the 0. We can just do item.id. Item.id, role ID. All right. Okay, now let's go back to our form and fix this. I feel like this is the first build it with Tim that's like a true version of let's try to make this difficult and see if we can pull it off. Okay, so get a single record, table ID is that. We can delete these two. Record ID is going to be the record value of the connection field for roles. Okay, so that should work now. Pipe value of role ID. Okay, by passing a connection field as a record value, what we're actually passing behind the scenes is the record ID. All right, so back to this. Let's try it one more time. Test, this has to be a new email. Default role, save. Okay, and if we go back here, perfect. We now have the role ID saved. Okay, so I think we're getting there. We're starting to put the pieces together. We have the temporary password that we can email out. We have the role ID that we want. The next step in this is, again, back to our form where we're adding our users. We're going to add another record rule. And I think we can include it in the same one where we're getting the ID for the selected role, where then we can change the role to a custom value of our custom role that needs password reset. All right, so another test. Test2 at test.com, default role. And wonderful. You can see this worked here. So here's our newest user. So it actually, here, we'll go back to the builder. Okay, so it saved the ID of the first role that we actually selected on the form. So it saved the ID of default role, but then it updated it to needs password reset. Okay, so now we're getting there. Remember, this is also emailing the credentials for this user to log in. Now, let's pretend that that user is actually going to log in and start to set that up and make sure that that's going to work okay. Okay, so somebody's going to log in with those credentials, the temporary password in their email, and we are going to set up a login redirect to say if the role is need password reset, then send them straight to their profile. Okay, so if we get this, okay, test2, and let's copy this temporary password, and we'll try to log in with this account and see if we get redirected, which we should. Test2 at test.com. Here's that temporary password. We log in. Oh, okay. Yeah, the status thing. Okay, so let's just go back to our form, and we'll include that in a record rule as well to set the status of the user to active. Okay, I don't think we need to mess with the status here. At least I don't think so now. I could be wrong on that, but let's just, again, we're pressing on here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and manually change the status of this account so that I can just log in and test the redirect. Um, let's see. Test2 at test. Great, awesome. Okay, so it did exactly what we wanted it to. It read our role of um, needs password reset, and it directed us directly to the profile. Okay, so what we need to do here is on the profile page, let's say we, um, hmm, let's just get rid of some stuff and just make it simple. We're just going to do the password field. And I'll put in a little bit of HTML here to just say, um, please update your password. Ooh, better yet, I think we can do, no, this should be fine. Please update your password. Yeah, we'll say that. Or please change your password. I'm trying to think of some other ways that we can try to like keep users here. But the most basic thing we can do is once the user changes their password and they hit save, the end goal is that we want to set their user role back to that original what am I trying to say? Original role that we set them. So we set them default. We gave them the role of default role. Then the record rule changed their role behind the scenes to needs password reset. Then they log in, get redirected to the profile component, and then when they actually change their password, we want to give them their original role back. So I think we're going to have to do it like this. We're going to have to select form value and set it to role ID. In order for this to work, though, we're going to have the role ID on the page, on the actual form. But, okay, let's do this too. We'll put the name and the email on here as well. And we'll set the name to disabled, read only. We'll set the email to disabled, read only. And then we'll set up a display rule to say if email is not blank, then hide the role ID. Otherwise, do nothing. Okay, so this is we're faking things here. Not faking it, but we're disguising things. Okay, so we're putting the name and email field on there to make it look, I don't know, more professional, I suppose, to say here's your name and your email that was created for you. It's disabled so that they can't change it because obviously somebody else created this for them. But we're also using those values on the form and display rules to hide the field that we don't want them to see. All right, so if I preview this page, you're going to see that we don't see the role ID. Let's just change this real quick and see if this does update our role. Not sure. Maybe it didn't like what we just did. Let's see what just happened. Didn't like it. Let's try it maybe one more time and see what that was all about. Okay. So, all right, that's not working how I thought it would work. I thought we could pass the record ID to update the role. Let me just go back and make sure that that's actually set up. Did I even set up a rule to do that? It did. Okay, so we're gonna have to do it another way. We're gonna have to do it with another pipe call to the Tadabase REST API. So in this case, we're gonna do update an existing record. So it's gonna be the table ID, the record ID, and we are gonna set. We need to get the field ID for the role. Field ID for role field, and the field value is going to be the record ID there. All right, so let's go back to data builder. The no, we won't go there. We'll go fields, not field ID, sorry, field slug. Just role. Okay, is that going to work? I don't know. Let's try it. Okay, so I know I've done this before, but I'm trying to figure out how I did. Um, let's go to rules, record rules. We'll do a pipe instead of this. We'll do, what was it? Update an existing record. The table ID we can pull from the record. The record ID we can pull from a record value. The field ID, I guess it's just role, so we'll try that. And the field value that we want to set is going to be the role ID. And then here, I guess we'll just set role ID to a pipe value of, let's try type, just so I can ensure that it actually changes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, save. Please work. Ah, awesome, it worked. Okay, so here's what happened. Here's what it looks like now. This is back to the original role that we created for that user, and the role ID field now just says success. So as an administrator, I guess now you have a little bit of feedback letting you know that everything went according to plan. Now, let me just take a moment to think about anything else we could do on this profile page to like keep a user here, right? So that they have to change their password, because right now, if they went to this page, I guess technically they could just click off the page and get out of their profile. One other thing I think we could do is if we go, I think we can do this with display rules again. We can hide this HTML field, I believe. Maybe, hold on. I mean, we can do this with here, but it's again, We're deep in the weeds here. So let's go to this HTML component. If we view the source code of this, you're going to see this is just inside of a paragraph tag. That's what the P is for. So if we were to change or add a class here to say, no, is this going to work? I don't know. Hold on. Password underscore reset. Let's just give that text a class and go back to display rules, and we can say add CSS. No. I might be wrong on this here. Hide CSS selector. So, okay. I think we have to do password. We have to include the dot. So include the actual dot to indicate that it's a CSS class. Otherwise, show. I'm just testing this for now. I'm just testing to see if that actually hides it. Ah, wonderful, it does. So right now, because the email is not blank, it's going to hide that HTML that we put in there because we gave our text a custom class. Okay, so what do I want to do now? I want to go back to the profile. I'm going to add the user role here as well. So this is going to be another hidden field. Okay, so just hopefully you're still following along. I didn't lose you minutes ago. So if the email is not blank, we're going to hide the role. We're going to hide the role field. We don't want to show that, but we want to use it in another display rule. So we're going to say if role needs password reset, then we're going to hide the CSS selector of password reset. And I'll show you something else we can do. Let's actually do this. We're going to give this another class, alert danger, I think. So I'm going to go, wait, did I do that right? If role is this, then we're going to hide that. Okay. No, that is wrong. That is wrong. If role is not that, then hide the message to change the password. So I suppose we could change this around and just do otherwise hide. So we'll do it that way. If role needs password reset, then we're going to show that message. Otherwise, we're going to hide it. So I'm going to go back to this one user here for just a moment, and I know I'm like breaking this what we've built here, but I just want to test. I just want to test that alert message too. Okay, so I need to find what that, let's see. We're doing all sorts of tricks today. So we're going to go here. Oh, alert success. Okay, so I'm actually going to copy alert success. Profile, HTML, source code, and we're going to take out that. We're going to paste in this, but we're going to say alert danger this time instead of success. Ah, awesome. It's showing right in the builder too. All right, now we preview this page. Okay, great. That's what the HTML is going to look like now. So we styled it to look like one of the Tadabase alerts, right? They reset their password, so on and so forth. All good. Let's try this for real now. So let's actually go back to here and let's get rid of all of these users and make sure this works from start to finish. Okay, so organization users. We're going to go to this page as an administrator, right? We're going to add a new record. So this is going to be, I guess we could just do another test user. Because again, we already know the email works, but let's go back. Let's change this. So let's change the email. I'm just going to preview this page for a moment because I want to just get the URL. Oh my gosh, I have so many tabs open. I want to get the URL for here. So, whoops, not the profile, sorry. Add users. So on the email that we're sending out, we're going to send a link to log in. Log in by clicking here. And we'll set this up as a link to the profile. Nope, this is going to be login. I'm sorry. I'm all over the place here. It's going to send them to the login page. So now they can click the link, use those credentials, log in, and everything should be good to go. All right, let's test this just a moment. All right, so we're going to preview the page. We're going to add a new user. I'll add like myself, I suppose. Default role. Okay, good. Change the role, gave us a password, set the status to active, and we have an email. Log in by clicking here. So this should take us to the login page. Of course, I didn't actually copy the password, so let's do that. And this was Tim +1. Should log us in, redirect us to the profile, show this message. Then we reset our password, hit save. Okay, so that didn't actually pull that away yet, but I'm sure if we refresh, okay, if once we refresh, it goes away. I suppose one last thing we could do to maybe clean that up a little bit is add a redirect on the submission of this profile component. Rules, submit rules, and we could just redirect to the sample page. Sure. All right, so let's pretend that we just got here to change our password. We change our password, we hit save, and it redirects us to the sample page. Whew, okay, I think that's it. I think that's it. Like I said, that's a tough one. Lots of stuff going on here. I guess let me try to recap this slightly. Okay, so we added three things to our users table. We added an additional role called needs password reset so that we can use this role to redirect users and hide things using display rules when needed. We also added two additional text fields, one to hold a temporary password, one to hold the ID of the initially selected role when creating a user. Okay, then everything else was done between pipes and the page builder. So we have a form to add a new user. Upon creating a user record, we are doing two rules. We are generating a password and saving it to the real password field and the temporary password field. We are using the Tadabase REST API to look up the ID, the record ID of the role that we selected on the form. Then we are changing the role to a custom value of the needs password reset role and setting the user status to active. And then we are sending an email with the login credentials to the user we just created. When that user logs in, they are redirected to the profile page using a login redirect rule based on that needs password reset role. When they get to their profile, they see an HTML message that says, please change your password. We have slightly modified the HTML in here with a custom class of password reset and alert danger just to style it and then also to use it in display rules. We have set up display rules to hide fields that we don't want the user to see but are necessary in order for our workflow to function. And we are using that custom CSS selector to, again, in display rules to hide the message when the password is changed. And then submission rules to redirect the user once they're done changing their password back into the application to a page of your choosing. All right, I think we're good. I think there's always more we can add, but right now we're not going to do that. We're just going to keep it as is. This video, I think, is probably gone on longer than any of the other videos that I've made in this series. And it's certainly the most complex, very kind of outside the box thinking here. So terrific suggestion. I had a lot of fun building it. Like I said, I did this similar thing once a long time ago. It was a nice refresher. So, anyways, that's it for this week's episode of Build It with Tim, and I hope you enjoyed it. Be happy to discuss any questions on our community that you may have about this particular video or this process. And I'll see you next week. Take care, everybody. Bye bye.